own mother. Thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt. Dominate the Earth! Make sure he gets your good side.
Azula, we don't speak that way.
How to Redeem Azula Part 2. Azula is such a beautiful character. Well, maybe not physically sometimes, but she is written very well. She's slowly become my favorite character in Avatar, and that's not without its merits. Azula's arc is still open as a character, and that's a large part of her appeal. I guess everyone's just waiting to see if this poor girl can go from psycho princess to normal-ish person. That is, if you actually think she can. Many people feel like Azula is incapable of turning it around, or that she's better as a villain. And while I can see those points, I've always felt that Azula can and does deserve to be redeemed. In my last Azula video, which you should definitely have watched by now, I set out to prove and to write a story about Azula redeeming herself. Today, we continue Azula's journey. It was not by chance that Azula had been defeated. It was always clear that Azula was the greater combatant, the greater strategist, and the greater power. Azula had always been feared, and with that fear, she held the dreaded power to control anyone. But she'd met her match in the face of compassion. Her friends and family, Zuko, Mai, Ty Lee, and Ursa, had refused to fight Azula, leaving her open to her own insecurities. Dangerous, yet defenseless, Azula was left to decide her own fate. What was it Zuko said, she thinks? It's my turn now. Azula takes a moment to collect herself. She stands up, avoids Ursa's glare, and stares directly into Zuko's eyes. You managed to get quite the better of me years back, Zuzu. I did not deserve to be Fire Lord if I was too weak to defeat you. However, recently I have regained my composure and have defeated you, the reigning Fire Lord, in glorious Agni Kai. I know that I am not meant to be Fire Lord, but then again, the current Fire Lord remains too soft and too fragile. It's time we set the record straight once and for all. Zuko stares back at Azula dumbfounded. Before he can say anything, Ursa, Mai, and Ty Lee anxiously interject, pleading with Zuko to deny the request. You're in no position to fight, says Ursa. Zuko looks at his mother, Mai, and Ty Lee for a second, and then turns his attention back to his sister. 2 weeks, he says solemnly. Zuko assigns royal guards to accompany Azula wherever she goes in the palace. She is not allowed to leave or to bend unless she is practicing under careful watch of Mai and Ty Lee. Azula graciously accepted Zuko's terms and takes this time to convalesce over the events of the prior days. Although she willingly agreed to Zuko's terms, she still finds the whole situation perplexing. How did he do this to me, she thinks. All of the others too. How could they defeat me without a single strike? Azula, my love, are you alright? Calls Ursa from the next room. Ursa had been trying for days to talk with Azula, going as far as to move to the adjacent room where she knew Azula would be able to hear her, to feel her presence. Surprisingly, Azula had made some effort to talk with Zuko, and even Mai, but Ursa she would avoid. Ursa she shunned, out of fear of her conflicted feelings. Azula, please my child, know that I will always be here for you. Frustrated and on the brink of a breakdown, Azula requests an audience with Zuko. Take me to see father. I think I have some words for him alone. Is it mom? Asked Zuko. I told her she should give you some space, but she clearly didn't listen. That's enough about her, Zuzu. Take me to father now. Zuko nods, dismisses the half-dozen guards stationed between Azula and himself, and leads her down the path to the royal prison. On the way, Azula asks Zuko, so, When I've defeated you in Agni Kai, are you going to stick me in a place like this too? Or perhaps you'll take mercy on me and put me back in the crazy house. Zuko stops walking, holds his fire torch closer to Azula's face, and replies, I've gotten plenty of requests to do exactly that, or worse. All suggestions have been personally ignored. Zuko continues walking down the corridor, leaving Azula stupefied. Clearly, he has lost his mind, that Zuzu. Right? Thinks Azula. Hurry up, calls Zuko, his voice echoing back dozens of yards. Azula hurries to his position, joining him directly outside of Ozai's cell. Zuko looks over at Azula with a raised eyebrow. Go ahead in, he says. Won't you join me? Asks Azula, slyly. I've said my piece to him in the past. Besides, he doesn't have much to say to the Fire Lord these days. Zuko gives a slight grin and walks back down the hall. Azula watches as he disappears around a dark corner, then turns her attention back to the door. Azula's feelings on Ozai are much less conflicted than that of her mother. He is nothing to her now, just a shell of his former self. However, there is one thing she desperately needs to know. One thing she knows he thoroughly understands. Azula opens the door slowly and takes a couple steps forward. Azula, says Ozai in an aged, gravelly voice. Azula stares down at what remains of her father. His hair is all but snow white. His skin hangs loose, and there's no mistaking the tiredness in his voice. How did you know it was I, father? Your brother cares not for subtlety when he opens that door, nor do the guards. Of course, I've had no regal visits in quite some time. What brings you here? Has he imprisoned you as well? No. Yes. Maybe, I don't know, stammers Azula. For what I've done, I ought to be thrown down here for the rats, just as you have. But that's just it. He hasn't done it. Why is that? Ozai stares at Azula a moment, notices a tear staining her left cheek, her collar bent out of shape, the slight tremble in her limbs. Instantly, a smirk spreads across his lips. You are weak, he says. He doesn't imprison you because he no longer fears you. Azula wipes a tear away and replies, You're right. His fear has been replaced by something foolish. Sympathy? Compassion? Madness? But what of the others? Asks Azula. My former friends don't fear me either. It's driving me crazy, she screams. Azula, silence yourself, snaps Ozai. Look at me. Despite your foolish weakness in the past, your brother has always been beneath you, beneath your cunning and your skill. He does not fear you, nor did the others, because they do not believe you to be the same Azula that I do. One born to be Fire Lord and succeed me, the Phoenix King. Ozai begins to cackle loudly, filling the cell with mad laughter. Azula stares back at her father, notices the bloodshot in his eyes, the familiar white coat wrapped around his torso, the musty reek of his cell. At once, she realizes the deception, how he has tried to manipulate her. Clearly, he has gone mad in this cell, lost all grip on reality, and descended into insanity. Azula gives a traditional bow and replies, All hail the Phoenix King. Ozai continues to cackle, louder and louder than before, until he's retching on the floor. Azula slips out of the room slowly, making sure the iron door is shut tightly behind her. She bumps into Zuko halfway down the hall. What happened? Azula nervously replies, I got what I wanted. Zuko stares at Azula perplexed. He's rarely seen her so bothered by anything. Come on, says Zuko. We have a play to catch. Zuko drops Azula off at her quarters with a single ticket. She takes it, examines it, but says nothing. Zuko only nods and leaves her alone. On the other side of the door, Ursa begins to call to Azula, but Zuko stops her and takes her on a walk throughout the palace. Azula lays slumped over her bed, staring blankly at the ticket. She hadn't noticed before, but the ticket reads, Admittance 1, Love Amongst the Dragons. At first, Azula is angry, belligerently burning the ticket into ash. The play reminds her of her mother, whom she hates. Azula doesn't stop with the ticket though, as she begins to burn every painting of her mother or Ozai that she sees. By the end, her room is covered in gray dust and black ash. Guards storm into her room, hands and spears at the ready for an attack, but Zuko arrives shortly thereafter, dismissing them all. He walks up to Azula, coughing through the dust. She zaps the floor beneath him with lightning, sending him back a couple feet. Zuko rebounds, but doesn't firebend, only reaching a hand out to Azula. Come on your feet. And no surprises this time. I'm still sore from last week. Suits you right, says Azula, ignoring his gesture and regaining her feet. Keep that wretched woman away from me, and I'll join you at the play. Noted, says Zuko solemnly, and they both leave together. On the way to the theater, Azula notices that Zuko is uncharacteristically calm. So, no big lectures about the evils of arson? Nah, says Zuko. Aren't you gonna say anything, Azula snaps? About father? About me? Maybe, says Zuko. Maybe it's time to accept that your little mind games don't work. At least not when I'm not afraid. Azula digs her nails into Zuko's back and shoves him as hard as she can. Zuko's arms crash into the earth, covering him in scrapes and bruises. Azula looks down at him in glee, expecting to see anger reflected back through Zuko's eyes, or maybe even a hint of fear. However, Zuko only stands, dusts himself off, and sighs. You should save that for our rematch. Azula slumps forward a bit, a clear look of defeat spread across her face. I'm more than a match for a weakling like you, Zuzu, she screams, nostrils flared in anger. And I won't be accompanying you to another ridiculous play. Suit yourself, says Zuko, calmly walking off. Azula considers leaving the capital. Surely she can defeat all the guards and escape unscathed. Seconds before she's made her choice, she hears her mother's voice once again, calling out to her. She struggles to identify if she's imagined her mother's voice or if she is really closing in on her. Without looking for confirmation, she bolts down the path Zuko took to the Royal Theater. On the way, she looks around and notices that the entire capital is still deserted from their last skirmish. Every street corner, every building is devoid of life. She knows she's near Zuko in the theater when she hears sounds besides the tapping of her own boots. Once inside, Azula is transported back to her childhood as nostalgic memories of the Ember Island players flood her mind. At the top, in the nosebleed seats, sits Zuko. Azula is surprised to see a relatively full front row consisting of important advisors, royal guards, and a few notable business leaders. Azula makes her way up to Zuko, amidst some strong glares from the rest of the theater, including some of the actors. Yes, that's right, thinks Azula. Scared? You should be. She joins Zuko at the top, and he gives her a knowing look. It was Mom, wasn't it? You just know me so well, she says sarcastically. So, are you going to bore me with a non-butchered version of Love Amongst the Dragons? Zuko nods no, and asks, haven't you given the cast a good look yet? Azula looks down at the play, examines the actors. The actor playing the Blue Spirit brazenly fumbles every other line. In the background, you can hear the director feeding him lines. Oh, says Azula shocked. You got the Ember Island players. Not just that, says Zuko. These are the same exact actors and director from all of those summers ago when we were kids. Azula can't help but to feel a pang of happiness. Despite the bad performance, Azula allows herself, if only for a few hours, to truly relax and enjoy her time with her brother. She falls asleep halfway through, and when she awakes, Zuko is helping her to her feet. "How was the play?" says Azula with a yawn. "The worst I've ever seen," says Zuko with a smile. Now that's been part 2 of my Azula Redemption series. I plan on dropping part 3 as soon as I can, so I'll need you to like, comment, and subscribe to help me get these out in a timely manner. Thank you for your patience and support. Dreaded Patrick, out.